Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this panel on gender identity and social change in Iran. We were supposed to have two panelists on this panel. Unfortunately, Fahimeh Azmudeh is not able to join us. She was supposed to talk about gender identity in Iranian society based on dramaturgy theory. So today we only have one panelist. Zahra Bagherishad is going to talk about the new alternative masculinity among Iranian young men. As you know, masculinity is an under research area of study generally around the world, but specifically in Iran. So we are very excited to hear about this research. Zahra Bagherishad is a researcher of gender studies at OBO Academia University in Finland, when she's conducting research on single immigrant moms in Sweden. She's also the director of Network of Men Against Honor Violence. This presentation is based on her second master thesis on gender studies, intersectionality and change at University of Linköping in Sweden in 2020. She previously studied communication studies in Stockholm University and also in Tehran University. So the floor is yours.
As Zeynab said, my presentation today is based on my MA thesis in gender studies and intersectionality at Linköping University. And it has been analyzing and discussing the rise of alternative masculinities among the young generation of men, Iranian men, with the focus on the protest action of a part of social media users to Romina Ashrafi's honor killing in the north of Iran as the case study. First of all, I would just say that by using the term Iranian men, I mean those who identify themselves as men. This study was an interpretive study, and it was using thematic analysis within the perspective of intersectionality. And the case study, as I've told, in this research is built by analyzing material of the campaign of Man Bi Namusam, or a man without namus, or a man without, honor. Yeah, let me just use the concept of namus or the word of namus. This case study was on social media, on Facebook, mostly Twitter and Instagram. And the purpose of my study was to examine the reaction of Iranian social media users to Romina Ashrafi's honor killing from the perspective of masculinity, and to explore whether it's a manifestation of the alternative masculinities in a part of Iranian community or society, a very, very small part. And this is a case study of campaign on social media, and it will not generalize to the whole society or even to the Iranian community abroad. I think you know Romina Ashrafi, but I will briefly explain about her. On May 21st, I think was 2020, Romina Ashrafi, a 14 years old girl in north of Iran, was killed by her father, Reza Ashrafi. And it was an honor killing because she was in love with her boyfriend and planning to marry him. But Romina's family was opposed to her decision, and they wanted to stop her. After a long period of conflict, Romina had far away from home with her boyfriend, and her father asked her to back home, and he promised not to harm Romina. And he promised to allow to get married with a boyfriend. But unfortunately, a few nights later, he killed Romina in her sleep. The media coverage of this honor killing was very extensive in Persian language media, both abroad and in Iran. And the public debate about the culture of honor, I use the culture of honor, but I don't believe in the culture of honor. But this debate in media was focused on the culture of honor in Iran and women's lives, and they gained attention about the honor killings and honor-related violence in Iran, and the news of honor killings of women and children spread across the media and public opinion in Iran in that time. Women rights activists, lawyers, and public debaters and journalists started to talk about and started to highlight the concept of honor-related violence and honor killings. And all this led to the reaction of many Iranian social media users on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and they showed their protest to this honor killing, sharing Romina Ashrafi's photos and short videos and, very small text about honor killings. And they started to use hashtags associated with honor killings. For example, no to honor killing, na be khushulat namusi, or women are nobody's honor, zanan namus hich kas nistan. And more Iranian men, or who those identified themselves as men, joined these social media campaigns. And many of them started to use the hashtag zan namus hich kas nist, women are nobody's namus or honor. But a group of men started to use some new hashtags. No believe in honor, I own no honor, man without namus. In Persian, man bi namusam, or man namus nadaram. And I prefer to use man without namus or man bi namusam in this presentation. They started to use this hashtag because they wanted to react strongly to this honor killing, and they emphasized the right and power of women over their bodies by protesting the concept of namus, and they try to say that fighting with honor-related violence and honor killing is the responsibility of men, because this is a violence which is a start from men to women. And they try to take initiative to fight against honor-related violence, because fighting against honor-related violence was the responsibility of women. And women activists, feminist activists took this responsibility. But a group of men started to say that this is our responsibility as well. And we should, for the first step, we should say that, okay, I don't believe in namus. I have no namus. It means that I won't have control on the bodies of women, my children, my woman, girlfriend, sister, daughter. The concept of namus is a taboo in Iranian society. And therefore, a group of men, mostly young men, but they belong to various political and ideological beliefs, and, they belong to various age groups, but mostly young men from Iran, for example, started to use the hashtag of man namus nadaram. The first picture means I have no namus. One of the famous writers in Iran, Pedram Ebrahimi, was the first person, one of those first person, in Iran, not abroad, who used the hashtag man namus nadaram and man bi namusam. And he explained about his mother, and he wrote that, why should I even imagine that I can decide over my mother's life just because she is a woman and I'm a man? It may be very simple meaning, but in that concept, in that context and in that culture, it was something like breaking the stereotypes of masculinity. And then Pedram Ibrahimi's post on Instagram got many attentions, very negative and very positive comments, both negatively and positively, because some of men had some aggressive reaction to him, and they told that, no, it's not our responsibility to fight against honor-related violence, so we are not binamus, and the namus, it doesn't have any negative meaning. And they started to discuss with Pedram Ibrahimi and the other men who started to use the hashtag. However, this reaction by Iranian men, for example, Mansour, and he started to write about namus and the concept of namus and the importance of the role of men to fighting against honor-related violence. And this reaction reported in some media, both Persian and even in Sweden, Radio Sweden or Swedish radio and magazine, Feminist Perspective, wrote some reports about this social media campaign because it was interesting for them, because they didn't think that, we can find some kinds of pro-feminist movements among some Iranian men in social media. But to explore how some patterns of alternative masculinities are featured in this act or in this binamusi campaign, I have to very briefly speak about the concept of masculinity. I use the word masculinities instead of masculinity because Connell, I think, I can say that the most famous Australian psychologist in terms of masculinities. Connell started to use the term of masculinities instead of masculinity. And Connell emphasized on the relation between the masculinities and gender equality instead of masculinity alone. According to Connell, we have 4 different categories of masculinities. The first one is hegemonic masculinity, or in Persian we say اقتدارگرا, مردانگی اقتدارگرا. Hegemonic masculinity is the idealized way of being a man. And we maybe think that most men belong to this group, but it's not correct. Connell emphasized that this is a small group of men who belong to the category of hegemonic masculinity. Connell explained that all men leading position in business and political acts and the public sectors represented hegemonic masculinities. I think one of the examples is Donald Trump or, another famous celebrities around the world. They represent the hegemonic masculinity, the ideal picture or image of being a man. Another category is subordinate masculinity. It means masculinity that are economically, culturally, legally, and politically excluded. For example, homosexual men, or the men who are soft or so-called soft men, child-oriented men, for example. In Persian, we say bache, or some other words that we explained for soft male. And those who cross the line between male and female roles, or they are often regarded as feminine compared to the other men. They belong to subordinate masculinity compared to the other men. And Connell notes that these men have the least hegemonic attitudes in family relationships and in relation with women. The third one is participating masculinity, means those men who are negotiating with hegemonic masculinity in everyday life. The reason for this is that in everyday life, these men have to negotiate with women and with other men. They don't believe in hegemonic masculinity, but they have some negotiation with the rules of hegemonic masculinity and with women, which leads to change the construction of masculinity among them. The last category is marginalized masculinity, according to Connell. And this is related to class, race, ethnicity, and is linked to the authoritarian of hegemonic masculinity of the dominant group. But we have some critiques of on Connell's categories of masculinity. For example, Messner has an intersectional perspective on masculinity, and Johansson and Dervishpour they have some critiques on Connell's theories on masculinity, and they think that this description, Connell's description of variation of masculinity cannot explain about two other types of masculinities, alternative masculinity and nostalgic masculinity. And these two, they are the terms that these two researchers had explained. Alternative masculinity, according to them, is a pattern of masculinities who are some pro-feminist men or a group of men that we call them oppositional masculinity, and they have a critical attitude to the dominant male structures in the society. And they try to follow the values of gender equality and equal structures for both women and LGBTQ plus community. And they are active against gender-based violence and sexual violence in society. Nostalgic masculinity is, on the other hand, is characterized by the return to a strong feeling of masculinity. Those men who feel that they lost their power in family relationship, in society, in political structure, and they try to back to their power or to the iqtidar in Persian. For example, the groups of fundamentalists or nationalists or anti-feminist men, they belong to nostalgic masculinity. And the honor killing is the concept which has very close relationship to nostalgic masculinity, because when women and some other people, for example, they belong to LGBTQ plus our community, break the rules or norms of honor or namus, then mostly those men who believe in namus feel that, okay, they lost their control on the bodies of women, and they try to back to their power, and they try to do violence, and we call honor-related violence. But back to my study, as I've mentioned in introduction, it was an interpretive study, and I tried to do a thematic analysis on the material of campaign Man Bina Musam, and I have examined the text which were associated with hashtag Man Bina Musam or Man Namus Nadaram on social media, and try to identify some themes and topics. The first theme that I have tried to explain or I found in that text was liberty values. The second one was norm critique, feminism, political structure. I will back. Men's responsibility, honor killings, pro to be without norms. But I will explain about the first theme, liberty values. We had some texts that they try to talk or, to have some very short notes about sexual liberty, open-mindedness, critique of virginity, for example, with hashtag man bi namusam. I mean, they used the hashtag man bi namusam and they started to talk about virginity and critique of virginity, for example, and or they try to talk about sexual liberty, and this is something that we have to talk about that, or something like that. They had some narrations about their everyday life, or some short texts about the concept of sexual liberty or critique of virginity. For example, we had a text, 45 years old man from Iran, who has written in Twitter about his beliefs in virginity, for example. Years ago, when I got first familiar with the concept of virginity, I told my friends that if I ever wanted to get married, it would not matter to me if my wife was virgin, as there is no reason for me to control her body and her sexuality. All my friends made fun of me and said to me, "You are binamus. You are a man without namus." Now I am proud to say that I am a man without namus. For example, it was one of the texts. The reason for connecting the concept of virginity and namus, or honor-related violence, together is the importance of virginity in honor-related culture or norms, which can lead to some restrictions on women, control on women's bodies and sexuality and their sexual relationship, and punishing women if they lose their virginity before the marriage. In the very new lifestyle of Iranian women, virginity has lost its value, but it's still called one of the factors of quiet sexual revolution. We have some sexual revolutions in Iran, انقلاب جنسی, and many women and men, or the other people, maybe don't believe in virginity, but still many people consider virginity as not a value or as a norm, and they may still believe in virginity, and they associate virginity or this concept with women. So the critique of virginity in this context by men, or by those who identify themselves as men, means that traditional masculinity or the patterns of traditional masculinity may be changed, or it can, it means that we will have a transition from the traditional patterns of masculinity to another pattern of masculinity, maybe alternative masculinities. We have some other topics, for example, norm critiques, and they had some critiques on traditional norms, religious norms, and they emphasize on the need to change the culture. They had also talked about gender equality, critique of violence against women, gender-based violence, and they emphasized on the need to change the law, and they emphasized on the importance of the active role of men against honor-related violence, and they try to encourage the other men to start fight against honor-related violence and honor killings. And they talked about honor killings, and they talked about how to be proud to be a man without namus, for example. All these topics were associated with the hashtag man bi namusam, with a photo or a video of a man who was publishing this text. And some of them didn't have any picture and didn't have any real name because they were living in Iran. Mostly those who didn't have any real name on social media and they used the hashtag man bi namusam were lived in Iran. But some of them, for example, Peyghambarzadeh and Mansour, they were living in Iran And they openly started to use this hashtag and to discuss about the concept of namus. Most of texts that I have analyzed in this study, or I have reviewed in this study, considered the last female proud to be without namus, most of them. At the same time, they emphasize the responsibility of men in fighting against honor-related violence and breaking the taboo of namus. I can explain about the concept of some of these texts, or I can just mention to some of them. For example, one of them has written, namus is not, for example, is not a bad or, is not a very negative concept. We should be proud of it because namus is the concept of violence, shame, humiliation, and bloodshed. Proudly, I have no namus. Another one has written, in the benefits of being a man without namus, I invite you all to be like me. Another one has written, I wanted to say briefly and proudly that I'm also a man without namus. I would invite you to join this campaign and publish a short text or video with hashtag man bi namusam, man without namus, hoping for a better and more equal world. Another one, I am proud to do activities against namus, and all my loved ones are totally without namus. Another one, in response to Romina's honor killing, there is need to spread the protest and create more campaigns on social media by men with any name and any hashtag, including I have no namus and so on. Personally, I'm proud to be a man without namus, and more texts who have explained that they are proud to be a man without namus. The alternative masculinities has called oppositional masculinity, as I have explained before. It's characterized by close cooperation with women and LGBTQ community and critical attitude to the dominant male structure. Furthermore, alternative masculinity are represented by men who are more active than the other men in the fight against gender violence and sexual violence, and they work together with women and LGBTQ plus a community in this way. So it seems that this group of men, very small group of men that started to use hashtag man bi namusam, and they created this campaign, have tried to challenge one of the most important violence, gender-based violence in Iranian society, while enjoying the high self-confidence, and they used their privileges as a man because they identified themselves as a man. They used the privileges as a man to fight against a kind of gender-based violence. They try to say that for spread fighting against gender violence or honor-related violence, we have to, or we need to change the attitude of men as well as in society. So for this purpose, the considered Iranian men not only have criticized honor-related violence, but also encouraged the other to do as well. And therefore, I can claim that we can find some patterns or some kinds of alternative masculinities among this behavior on social media. We cannot generalize to the whole society or Iranian community. Even some of them are more radical in their critique of the culture of namus, and they even see the monogamy as a manifestation of control over the body of women. For example, in a very, very short text, an Iranian man who is very well-known political activist living abroad, he attacks the concept of traditional family, and he proudly says, "Man bi namusam, nasabam shayad be zani fahishe dar shahr Bukhara beresad." It was one of the very nice text that he has written about man binamusam. He means that, he wanted to critique the relation between the concept of namus and homeland. At the same time, he attacks the monogamy as a manifestation of traditional heterosexual masculinity. Reacting against the concept of namus and sexuality is one of the most difficult and controversial areas for men in Iran and the other traditional societies, as they feel that their masculine authority is being questioned or is criticized by the other men. When a man calls himself a binamus or a man without namus, maybe the other men or the other people who believe in namus start to criticize him. We had some criticize on campaign Binamusi on social media. For example, some of men who are well-known political activists abroad, they had some negative reaction and they thought that no, we don't have to use the concept of Binamusi. We can support women in the fight against honor-related violence. We don't have to say that I am a man without namus and blah, blah, blah. But I think this very small group who has started this campaign and started to use, they are willing to radically make some critiques on the concept of namus. And they hope maybe that feminist values are developed among men as well as women, because since the Iranian Revolution or Islamic Revolution in 1979, we have seen a development, very huge development of Iranian women's struggle against gender-based violence and gender apartheid. But in this study, I tried to argue how Iranian men, mostly young Iranian men, would join this struggle to combat violence against women and to achieve gender equality with the focus on the honor-related violence. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this presentation. As I said before, there are not so many studies in this area, so we really welcome this research for filling the gap in the area of masculinities studies. I invite you to ask your questions from our panelists.
Thank you very much. Really, really interesting. Fascinating. Sorry, can I just ask some tangible questions? I mean, as you said, you thought it was quite a small group of people. So I'd be interested in the size of, if possible, the number of people who were kind of presenting these messages. And you also kind of talked about your ability to say the sense that those in Iran were probably using the hashtag rather than real names. So I'd be interested in how many people were presenting the message inside Iran versus outside Iran. And then I think the more important question, because even if it's a small group, it's that dissemination. What kind of level of kind of interaction did you see with other social media users? How many people were viewing these things and, as you said, responding positively and negatively? So I'd just be interested in some of the stats, to be frank.
Nice question. I don't know actually how many people have used these hashtags, but I have analyzed 210 texts for this, but very, very short text. Some of them was long, but mostly very short text with hashtag man binamusam and man namus nadaram. It's the same in English, a man without namus, but it's not same in Persian. Man namus nadaram is much better than man binamusam for men. Man binamusam is more radical compared to man namus nadaram. But I have considered both hashtags, and I don't know actually how many of them were living in Iran, because I didn't do any in-depth interview on them. I have just I did just an analysis on social media material. Unfortunately, I didn't have chance to talk to them, but I guess that those who didn't have any real name on social media were living in Iran, because those who started to use this hashtag with their real name, they told that, some of them told that, I'm living in, for example, Germany. Now I'm living in Sweden. And they tried to explain the process of changing their minds about namus. But the other persons who didn't write about that, didn't say anything, I guess they were living in Iran, But among Iranian men who were living in Iran, I just know 2 of them that I've explained. And about the reactions on social media, I think you asked about the reactions of the other people. We had many different reactions. For example, a group of feminists and Iranian women activists and women's rights activists didn't have any positive reaction to this campaign, because they believe that if men start to talk about honor-related violence, they will keep the place of women. They told that, women have many long process of struggling against honor-related violence. They have some achievements, so it's not time to leave these achievements to men. They wondered if the voice of men is rising by this campaign. They were wondering if men don't use these privileges and this place to raise the awareness and the voice of women and the importance of fighting against honor-related violence. They wondered if, as well as the other areas, the voice of men are rising during this. But another group, for example, of the other activists, Iranian activists, they had some positive reactions, but mostly negative reactions were from men who still believe in namus, and they feel that talking about binamusi is a process to losing their power, and they don't want to lose their power, the rest of their power, because they know that, this struggle, this fight with honor-related violence has started with women and with women rights activists, feminists, but they don't want to lose the rest of their power by themselves. So, I can say that we had to discuss with many of Iranian men who were against this campaign, and they had some discussion that binamusi is not something that we have to be proud about that. But in Iran, we had also another reaction, or I could see another reaction from the government. Hamid Rasai was one of the parliament members, I think so. And the other people persons from the Iranian regime, I don't remember their name, they had some reactions and published in media in Iran, newspapers, and they told that, you can see, they have started a binamusi or bighairati campaign, and now it's time that Moderator police is starting to arrest the men without namus instead of women, because the problem of society is these men. It was a reaction, and they had some reports. I don't remember, in TV or, it was in video, very short video, and they used the picture of these men who had started this campaign, and they thought, they are men without namus. Let's take them, let's arrest them instead of women, because the problem of society now is these men.
I just was wondering that when they were using the binamus, this type of talk, did they mention that the violence against women and the critique about the violence against women?
Yes.
Because this is important.
Yes.
They
Exactly.
raise this awareness, but because just binamuz, maybe it's not clear properly what is their position.
Most of them try to talk about the relationship between namus and binamusi and gender-based violence and violence against women in the name of namus. But I would say that using the concept of binamus, I think just in Persian language we can understand. I'm so sorry that I cannot explain in English very well. But when in Persian we say binamus, it means that a man without nothing, And when a man uses this hashtag, even he doesn't use any text or he doesn't explain anything, it means that, he's against the patterns of patriarchy or, violence against women. But most of them try to explain why they call them binamus. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your very interesting talk. I have a more abstract question, and I'm not even sure how to formulate it properly. It's about the concept of masculinity and manhood. Have you come across themes that by these men or other activist men who advocate for moving away from masculinity completely, as opposed to defining alternative, oppositional, positive modes of masculinity? And linked to that, this is a very general question, but I am struggling with understanding why we need a concept of positive masculinity as opposed to moving fully away from masculinity. When it comes to womanhood, there have been all these discussions to deconstruct the concept of womanhood, but it has this solidarity impact. So it's understandable that we keep using it because the subjects are oppressed subjects and they can bound together, as much as we also deconstructed and ultimately envision a world without these dichotomies. But what is the positive value of masculinity when the subjects are basically members of the community that oppresses women, and they have to basically move away from that community of manhood?
The concept of masculinity or masculinities, because I use masculinities instead of masculinity to explain this question, is not in contrast to feminism or femininity. It's a characteristic. So we have to talk about masculinity because it's a part of, it's a feature, we cannot ignore it. And we don't talk about positive or negative masculinity. We don't talk about toxic or non-toxic. We talk about the different types and different categories of masculinity, which would be positive or negative. Hegemonic masculinity is not negative or positive. It's a kind of masculinity that has many roles to shaping the gender norms in the society. So we have to talk about them. We cannot say that, okay, we can just talk about negative and positive masculinity, blah blah blah. No, alternative masculinity is not a positive masculinity. I don't mean that if a man is following the alternative patterns of masculinity, so he is a very positive man, or if doesn't follow, he's following the toxic masculinity. Connell didn't talk about toxic or positive or negative masculinity, or the other researchers, they didn't talk about positive or negative masculinity as well. So this is not a concept that we can ignore it. Even when we are talking about masculinity, we are not talking about it from the heterosexual perspective. For example, we have some people who belong to the LGBTQ community and they identify themselves as men. So they are following the patterns of masculinity. they don't follow the patterns of femininity, because they identify themselves as men. So how could we explain the situation of these people? So we have to talk about some categories of masculinity, and therefore some researchers talked about the subordinate masculinity, or alternative masculinity, or the class and gender, the sexual orientation in terms of masculinity, because some groups of men they have some privileges in terms of being a man, but they are oppressed by the hegemonic masculinity, and we cannot ignore them.
Thank you so much. Just a further clarification question. I fully appreciate then that these are conceptual tools that are used to explain the various modes of behavior that we see existing in the society. So they are not normative concepts. Even alternative masculinity is not a normative concept. You are trying to basically categorize a group of men who exhibit different behaviors. When it comes to campaigning, though, and envisioning a different future, what would the normative concept be then? It seems that I'm just trying to understand if men come together and want to advocate for a different form of existence in the future, what would be the concept that they should use? When it comes to feminism, I think still, despite all the problems with the dichotomies of women and men, women and feminist groups keep using the concept of womanhood. But it feels wrong to use the concept of manhood. And I'm just wondering what the normative concept that would be helpful here.
I think intersectional feminism can help us to solve this problem and to have a way to think about this issue that you have explained. Because intersectional feminism is denying that, the concept of it's not just about the concept of being woman and man, and it's more, relative to the non-binary groups of LGBTQ plus group, and I think if we have an intersectional perspective in terms of masculinity and even feminism, we can imagine the world that you were wondering. But I have another answer to your question as well. I don't think that if men want to follow some patterns of alternative masculinity, they will help women and LGBTQ community. They will help themselves because they are also, they have so many privileges in this structure, but they have also missed many things in the process of patriarchy, and they will help themselves to develop their feelings, for example, as a father or, as a partner or as a, friend. I have a very, very small example. In Sweden, we have an organization. They are working on promoting the alternative masculinity patterns among men. They have some groups of fathers, very small groups. They are sitting together. They are talking together about their feelings. They mean that it's not usual that men are sitting together and talking about their feelings together, And they think that, this is very simple and small example and act to develop alternative masculinity among men. And the benefits of this action is not just for women, it's for men as well, because those men who try to take responsibilities more, to be more with their children, they feel much better than the other men. Those men who try to cry when they are angry, and they don't follow the rules, the normal hegemonic masculinity as an ideal man, they feel much better in their everyday life. So we don't know about the future and changing the roles, gender roles. But I think the changing these roles would have some benefits for men as well.
I'm just wondering what remains of masculinity once they move away from all these negative traits of hegemonic masculinity. And maybe as, for example, right now this hashtag is very inspiring, that I am binamus. Wouldn't it be wonderful if men say, I am without masculinity? Men without masculinity. Basically nothing would remain of masculinity instead of categorizing these positive behaviors that men are coming together to fight for as a separate or a different type of masculinity.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I think you have a comment.
برای اینکه این بحث بسیار مهمی هست که شما مطرح کردید، ترجیح دادم که برای خود پاسخ عمیق‌تر به این بحث به زبان فارسی توضیح بدم در این مورد. ببینید تئوری اینترسکشنالیتی فقط راززدایی از نابرابری قدرت نیست، فقط شالود شکنی از به اصطلاح مفاهیم از جمله مسکولینیتی و غیره نیست، بلکه فقط در واقع توضیح نمیده که اینها واقعیت نیستن، یک کنستراکشنن یا ساختمان بندیان، بلکه علاوه بر راززدایی از کنستراکشن بودن اونها به ریکنسترکشن و دکنسترکشن، یعنی دو تا مفهوم تکمیلی دیگه داره. مفهوم دکنسترکشن که روشن همون شالوده شکنیه. ریکنسترکشن یک بازآفرینی نوینه. چرا و تا کجا این معتبر نسبی است، یعنی این هم حقیقتی رو در بر نداره، این هم یک مفهوم توافقی است. میخوام مرتبطش کنم به بحث. اولا alternative masculinity، منظور اتفاقا واژه دقیق oppositional masculinity or alternative masculinity در واقع داره مردانگی رو به سخره میکشه، چیزی که شما منظور نظرتون. بعد داره مردانگی رو نقد میکنه، میگه مردانگی مایه افتخار نیست. Alternative masculinity or oppositional masculinity is a question about not just critical review of masculinity norms and masculinity forms. Without this is deconstruction and reconstruction, because in the fact the reality in the intersectional perspective is some subjective question. You know, this is just a social construction. But the new masculinity is different from alternative masculinity or oppositional masculinity. In Sweden, which is very developed, the research about equality, gender equality, masculinity, etc., they talk about that the new man, Swedish new man, is same as equal man. We criticize that this is in the fact a new patriarchy which legitimizes man's dominance and women's under, the marginalized. But when we talk about alternative masculinity or oppositional masculinity, we mean that all of kind of this masculinity norms is in the fact heteronormative, is based as a dichotomy between man and woman, and is white feminism in the base. And because in the fact this is, we maybe talk about an multivariation of criticize against race, gender, and even masculinity norms in the alternative masculinity. Why is important we use even masculinity? Because, for example, the very famous Swedish woman, Gudrun Schyman, talk about all of men have to pay more tax. For what? Depends of violence in the society, violence in the family, etc. And men have to pay more tax. Just depend of that. It is very important. If you don't use even the new construction of masculinity, you never can, for example, talk about the man's responsibility for pay more tax. men's responsibility for more homework, men's responsibility for childhood, etc., etc.
Yeah, thank you for your contribution. Thank you. We are running out of time. Thank you for your great presentation, and we can continue this discussion outside this room.